Hello everyone and welcome to EduSearch Small Talk series where we discuss some key topics related to our clinical practice. So this is a very important topic and I am sure that all of you have learned the basics of nutrition, nutritional assessment and all. But when it comes to prescribing nutrition on rounds, we find it difficult sometimes. So here we are going to do a case-based discussion and we are going to see different clinical scenarios. These are actual patients that our team has managed and we are going to see when they require a nutritional prescription, why they require it, what all to prescribe and how. So key questions to address whenever we want to prescribe nutrition on rounds, whenever we want to write nutritional orders, whether it's outpatient or inpatient, we need to first assess whether nutritional support is required. So we need to see the indication for nutritional support in patients. The next thing we need to decide is the route, enteral nutrition or parenteral nutrition. So that is the next question that needs to be addressed. The third is what to prescribe, whether you are going to give formula feeds or you are going to give kitchen diet or you are going to give home based nutrition or you are going to give different fluids. If it is a parenteral nutrition, access is very important, whether it's a central line or it's a peripheral inserted central catheter or you are going to give peripheral parenteral nutrition. We'll see that later. But access is again important for enteral nutrition because it can be a nasojejunal tube or a nasogastric tube or a feeding gastrostomy, feeding jejunostomy, right? So access is important. Next, very important step to calculate is the requirement of patient. This is predominantly based on weight of the patient and some other parameters. And the last point is timing. Whenever you give a prescription to the patient, especially in outpatients, you need to tell them what to take and when. So essentially, if you answer these 6 questions for each patient, your nutritional prescription is ready. So let us now see what are some of the other considerations that are required other from nutrition based questions. One is patient comorbidities and ethnicity. You have to respect the patient belief systems as well. So if the patient is diabetic, you have to be careful about prescribing sugars. If the patient is vegetarian, you should know the vegetarian sources of different nutrition in the diet and so on. Next is disease specific need, and we will see different cases and you will see how disease or the patient diagnosis modifies your nutrition prescription. So it is not one size fits all category, and that is why this talk is important. Next is treatment related effects, and again we will highlight this on the basis of a case. So you are going to see a few cases in today's presentation as well as in the second part of this talk. Also important to consider is whether the patient is admitted or are you giving this prescription in the outpatient department. You have to counsel the patient regarding management of the access device. If it's a feeding jejunostomy, the dressing has to be dry. The patient should know how to flush the tube, or they should have nursing care to take care of these points. Mode of administration of feeds is also important, as I've already discussed. So apart from nutrition related specific questions, there are patient based factors, disease specific factors and treatment related effects that you also need to consider. So now let us see the first case. The other cases we will see in the second part. But in this case, we are going to see some very important points and how to answer the 6 questions that I told you, as well as the effects of the disease on nutritional prescription. So this is a young male who has acute upper abdominal pain and vomiting and mild abdominal distension. He has a history of chronic alcohol intake. He has no comorbid conditions. So this is your case, and when we do a CT scan of this patient, what we find is that he has acute necrotizing pancreatitis. Don't worry if the CT is not something that you know. We will be discussing acute necrotizing pancreatitis scans separately, but this is essentially acute necrotizing pancreatitis. So the first question is, what is the indication for nutritional support in our patient? So let us see what different indications are there for nutritional support. One of the very common indication is if the patient is going to undergo a major abdominal surgery or if there is an anticipation that the patient will be unable to eat for more than 5 days, or he is going to have a low oral intake because of his disease and can't maintain more than 50% of his recommended intake for more than 7 days. These are the cases that are going to need nutritional support, whether enteral or parenteral. The second group is patients with sarcopenia or patients who have had muscle loss. This is because we know in our basics of nutrition that muscle loss is characteristic of a long-standing malnutrition, right? The other is patients with severe nutritional risk. Now, if you have not seen nutritional assessment separately, we will prepare a video on nutritional assessment as well. However, this video is more for knowing how to apply your nutritional assessment basics to your patients. So another indication is weight loss more than 10 to 15% within 6 months, and this has to be unplanned weight loss. A patient with BMI of less than 18.5. This is subjective global assessment and nutritional risk screening, which we will see in the upcoming slides. Blood tests like serum albumin less than 3 grams or serum transferrin less than 200 are also indicators of severe nutritional risk in your patient. Another important point is if patient has undergone multiple surgeries or if patient has a chronic disease like tuberculosis or patient already suffers from severe malnutrition and is now getting admitted, these are basically the broad indications for the patient who is going to need nutritional support. So let us see some of these terms in a bit of detail and then we jump back to our case. These are three very important and upcoming terms that you need to study in your clinical practice now. We will also cover them in separate topics, but in brief, sarcopenia is reduced muscle mass and reduced muscle strength and physical performance. I'm sure you have heard of the word cachexia. Cachexia is reversible and treatable involuntary loss of fat, muscle, or both, usually due to chronic disease such as cancer cachexia. Right? So, difference between cachexia and sarcopenia is that cachexia will have involuntary loss of fat, protein, that is muscle, or both, whereas sarcopenia is reduced muscle mass. Sarco is muscle and it is due with reduced muscle strength and physical performance. Clinically, we can measure it using grip strength and gait speed. On the other hand, frailty can be because of sarcopenia, can be because of cachexia, as these are overlapping terms, and frailty is more of a physiological condition where there is an irreversible reduction in endurance and physiological function, which are predominantly due to age related changes, right? So this is what these terms mean. Subjective global assessment basically includes points from history and points from examination of your patient and then gives your grading. Grade C is an indicator for giving nutritional supplementation. Key points in history include gastrointestinal symptoms which lead to intolerance to diet, change in intake, predominantly reduction in intake, change in weight, and change in functional capacity. Your physical examination is your nutritional assessment where you look for loss of subcutaneous fat, muscle wasting, edema, and ascites, right? And if your patient falls in grade C, that is where your patient is going to need nutritional support. Similarly, nutritional risk screening has different points such as body mass index, presence of infection, reduced dietary intake, weight gain less than minimum, and all these different points, if the score is more than 5, that is when you need nutritional support. So coming back to our patient has the issues that because of his diagnosis of acute necrotizing pancreatitis, he is not going to be able to eat for 5 days or more and is going to have low oral intake. So this is one of the key indicators for our patient to start on nutritional support. So yes, our patient needs nutritional support. The indication is now clear. What will be the route? So as we know, the diagnosis is acute necrotizing pancreatitis. And studies in pancreatitis are very clear that you can give enteral nutrition in mild and moderately severe acute pancreatitis. And there is no harm with early enteral nutrition in severe acute pancreatitis as long as the person can tolerate enteral nutrition, right? So our patient has necrosis and that predominantly falls in moderately severe acute pancreatitis, and the patient can be given enteral nutrition, right? One point is that even in severe acute pancreatitis complicated by fistula, ascites, or pseudosis, if the patient tolerates enteral nutrition, you can still give enteral nutrition. So, patient needs nutritional support, first question. Second, the route as of now will be enteral, and you need to keep revisiting it. I will show how. Next point is what to give. So, you can give different formula feeds. I'm sure you have heard of these different feeds or their brand names. But basically, what these formula feeds are, they are pre-digested nutrients if it's elemental formula, and the osmolality is 1 kilocalorie per ml, right? Polymeric formulas can be low residue or high residue, and again they give 1 kilocalorie per ml. Whenever you read these terms, the word residue means fiber basically. So it can be polymeric formula, it can be elemental formula, which are pre-digested nutrients, and elemental formulas are usually what we use in pancreatitis. If you take calorie dense formulas, they are predominantly used for intragastric feeding. You can't use calorie dense formulas in jejunostomies, right? Calorie dense formulas are formulas which have more than 1 kilocalorie per ml. High protein formula or formula which contain 1.5 to 2 gram per kilogram of protein or more are usually used in critically ill ICU patients or trauma patients. Immune enhancing formulas are not routinely used, but they are also available. Predominantly contain omega-3 fatty acids, branch chain amino acids, glutamine, and arginine, right? So these are different enteral formulas. The commonly used ones in pancreatitis are elemental formulas. So that is what we use in this patient. Now, whether to go oral or tube enteral feeds, usually these pre-digested formulas in powder forms, you can use around 2 scoops to begin with, right? You can use a low density solution to begin with. What recommendation is that you can start with 2 to 3 scoops in 100 to 150 ml of water. However, 6 scoops can go in 200 to 250 ml of water, but your patient may have bloating. That is why initially we start with a low dose of fluid and powder, and we gradually increase it as per patient tolerability. Now, apart from formula feeds, can you lose solid diet in this case? I'm talking specifically for our case. So yes, clear liquids, semi-solid diet, and low-fat solid diet all have been studied in acute pancreatitis, and low-fat early oral solid diet has been recommended in mild acute pancreatitis. Studies that have compared liquids versus solids in patients who can tolerate enteral nutrition have not found any significant benefit with keeping the patients on liquids. So yes, early oral solid diet can also be used in this case if the patient tolerates, right? Now coming to our fourth question, that is the access for nutrition. So we have already decided that our patient will have enteral nutrition. So in enteral, you can use the stomach, that is by oral or by feeding gastrostomy or by a nasogastric tube, or you can use jejunum, which you can use through a nasojejunal tube or a feeding jejunostomy tube, or you can do enteric refeeding, right? These are the different options for enteral. Now, these tubes can be placed by endoscopic, open, laparoscopic approach, and the nasogastric tube can be placed on the bedside. Parenteral accesses can be central line, peripheral line, or peripherally inserted central line. Right. So these are the different access that you can have for nutrition. Our patient will have enteral nutrition, and we can do it by oral or nasogastric means as of now. And if he does not tolerate, we can use a nasojejunal tube. So now nasojejunal versus nasogastric in acute pancreatitis. The studies are very clear now that nasogastric feeding is safe and well tolerated. And both elemental and polymeric formulas can be. So nasojejunal is more frequently used in acute pancreatitis. However, studies have not shown a significant difference. So you can use nasogastric if there is low risk of aspiration and the patient is well oriented, or you can use nasojejunal feeding, right? Now we come to the fifth question, that is requirement of our patient. So if the patient has a BMI of less than 30, the energy requirement is 25 to 30 kilocalorie per kilogram, and protein requirement in acute pancreatitis is 1.5 gram per kilogram, right? So this is how we have to calculate. If the patient is obese, that is BMI is more than 30, then the energy requirement is 11 to 14 kilocalorie per kilogram for BMI between 30 and 50, and energy requirement is 22 to 25 kilocalorie per kilogram for more than 50 BMI. Protein requirement is 2 to 2.5 gram per kilogram based on the BMI. If the patient receives at least 80% of the prescribed dietary requirement, the patient has the best chances of survival. Another important question in pancreatitis is whether to give early nutrition or wait 2 to 3 days more before starting enteral nutrition. Now, this is a disease specific consideration on the timing of starting nutrition in acute pancreatitis. So, that is our sixth question, and that is timing. So, pancreatitis, the studies are very clear that early enteral nutrition has lower infective complication, lower systemic inflammatory response, and lower multi-organ failure rates. That is why early nutrition is better and it has lower mortality rates, right? So for this 60 kg patient, what we are going to give is an oral or tube feed, right? We are going to give nasogastric or nasojejunal. He will need 2000 kilocalories and 70 grams of protein, right? So that is predominantly the nutritional order compared to the requirement of the patient, the route and the access, right? Now we come to supplementary nutritional orders, whether the patient will need a prokinetic or not, and if you are using formula feeds, what will be the rate of administration. So rate of administration, there are 2 to 3 different ways of giving nutrition. One is bolus method, that you give 250 to 500 ml every 4 to 6 hourly, right? That is bolus or gravity method, and this can be used only in stomach because stomach functions this way. So rate of administration is done to simulate the function of the organ, right? The other is intermittent, that you can give some calculated amount every hourly or every 2 hourly. And the third mechanism is continuous infusion, which is how the jejunum works. So you can give 20 to 40 ml per hour by drip method. So these are different ways of administration. In stomach, you can use bolus or gravity method. In jejunum, you can use continuous infusion. In stomach also, you can use continuous infusion, but bolus methods are commonly used for the ease of administration. Now, when we prescribe enteral nutrition, how to monitor the patient? So the recommendations are to do input and output charting daily, urine output hourly or every 4 hours if the patient is stable, body weight to be done daily initially, and then once the patient is stable, you can do once a week. Blood investigations usually initially in acute care setting, we do complete blood count, sodium, potassium, creatinine, and blood urea nitrogen daily. Whereas once the patient is stable, you can do it once a week or even twice a week, right? So that is the usual blood tests that are required. Anytime when you start nutrition, you need to do sugar monitoring and electrolyte monitoring because these are the most common complications. So glucose you need to check 3 times a day or even more often if it has poor control in the patient. Once the sugar levels are monitored or once you have established the insulin needs of your patient, then you can reduce it to once a day or as and when required in a stable patient. So these are some of the common monitoring parameters that we use while using enteral feeding. When we are giving different ways of administration in enteral nutrition, one of the important monitoring point also is gastric residual volume, which we use by measuring a syringe aspirate, right? So you can use a 50 cc syringe and you can aspirate the Ryle's tube that you have placed. If the gastric residual volume is more than 500 ml, that is when you start aspirating before giving the feed, and that is one of a very key points that you should remember, that before giving any feed, the first step in bolus method is to aspirate, right? If the aspirate is more than 500 ml, that is the gastric residue at 3 to 4 hours is more than 500 ml, then you may have to add prokinetic agents, right? Which include metoclopramide, levosulpiride, and erythromycin. But erythromycin is not very commonly used. Commonly used agents are metoclopramide and levosulpiride. So these are the medicines to be added when your patient is having a high gastric residue, right? Also, in patients who have risk of aspiration, we recommend adding these agents preemptively to avoid aspiration. If there is high gastric residual volume, feeding can still be continued, right? So after adding prokinetic agents, if there is high gastric residue, feeding can still be continued, but you can continue it with reduced volumes, right? So that is the point. So now with all these points in mind, when you are going to write nutrition orders for your first case, your first point is nutritional support required? The answer is yes. The route is going to be enteral in our patient, and we are going to use formula feeds by oral or nasogastric tube as of now. So these are your first four questions. The requirement for our patient is 2000 kilocalorie and 70 grams of protein. And the timing we are going to follow is early nutritional initiation. Other than this, the supplemental orders that you need to give are, will your patient need a prokinetic and an antacid? So that is important. The fluid management of the patient is very important. You have to instruct your staff to measure the gastric residue, when and what monitoring tests are to be done, and what clinical parameters are to be assessed. You need to instruct, and you need to instruct the rate of administration, right? So I hope that is how you can prescribe nutrition very easily on your rounds. In the next or the last part of this presentation, we will see a few more cases, and we will see the role of parenteral nutrition and some other important aspects, as well as complications that can arise while using this nutrition. So stay tuned to our channel and watch out for the second part of this talk. Thank you.